Coronavirus, the markets, Bitcoin. What's the solution to all of this? And yeah, for those of you investing in crypto, is Bitcoin a potential safe haven? Let's take a look. Let's look at some of the facts. Hey and welcome to today's video. My name is Julian. On this channel, it's all about making you crypto fit. We discuss the beautiful world of decentralization, blockchain, cryptocurrencies, most of all Bitcoin. Today, I want to look a bit at the coronavirus. What does it mean for the economy? What does it mean for you as an investor? What are potential solutions? And let's take a look and let's look at some of the facts. And for this, I've prepared a brief PowerPoint that I want to go through that we can kind of highlight. So when you drop in, do me a quick favor, let me know in the chat where are you coming in from. Give me a thumbs up on the video, whatever you're watching. And if you're new to this channel, then subscribe because you don't want to miss out on any of those. Now, I want to give you a bit of an insight in German. I have this thing called an inner circle. I give regular updates in there, some really detailed kind of updates, and I want to give you a glimpse into one of those. It's a 28-pager. We're going to kind of run it through, and it should be quite easy and good. So this thing came out today, and I sent this out to a couple hundred people. And so let's look. A couple important things before we get started. It's all about data and facts. So I'm not going to do much emotions. I'm not going to do much opinions. I'm going to look at some of the opinions at the end, but the focus is really on economics. The focus is on the data and the facts around the coronavirus. What does it mean as an investor? What does it mean as a business owner? And that's really what I want to take a look at. Marisa, hi from Italy. Golly, I hope you are doing well in Italy. I hope everything is fine. Basti, hey, from Mallorca. Cool. So let's take a look. So basically, COVID-19 kind of popped up mid-January, end of January 2020 this year. It started last year, and it was mostly in China. Now, initially, Asia was hit, but now we can see here at the end, it started spreading. It went into Iran, Italy, obviously Italy getting hit like crazy. We have more and more countries now. Let's look at some of the data here. This is from Channel News Asia. You can see this. China has 80,000 infections, South Korea, Italy, Iran, France, Germany. So it's quite crazy. Singapore here, 150. Now we're going to look at some of Singapore as an example. On the one thing, as a good one, as a bad one. So let's look here. Now the key in all of this, in the reporting, is that the rates really differ. So we have amazingly different kind of probabilities and rates. For example, we have some countries that have very small kind of rates when it comes to prevalence versus death, right? So we have some countries here, I don't know, for example, South Korea, 7,051 death. And then we have Italy, around the same kind of infections, but way more death. And so the question is, how does this compare? The US is the same thing. US kind of has very few infections compared to how many deaths they have. And the reason is very simple. There's some countries, especially the red ones here, that do very diligent testing. So they're very detailed. And then you have countries, for example, like the US, also Italy, Indonesia, very notorious. They don't do any testing, right? So Indonesia, I think, has 2 cases. They don't test at all. So obviously you have this really large amount of people that are not being tested, and we're going to look at what does this actually mean in all of this. But to kind of understand in the different kind of comparisons when we have all this. And so obviously we sit here and we see this massive outbreak. And now the question comes up, well, what do we want to do with all of this? Can we stop this somehow? Should we stop this? What are the solutions in all of this? Because what we are seeing right now is we see very emotional markets. We see very emotional crypto. And so the question is, how does this all end and where does this go? And so what I want to look at a couple potential solutions and kind of discuss the upsides, the downsides. And I would love to hear from you in the comments, what do you think is the best solution, how to tackle that? And we're going to look at a couple. Now, solution number 1, we're going to find a therapy against it. So it could be a vaccination. Obviously, that might take a little bit. At the moment, there are a couple of potential candidates for actual treatment for example, a protease inhibitor. That was just a recent announcement being used in Japan right now. That could be, so obviously that would be a very, very powerful solution, because at the end, vaccinations, similar like influenza, well, would be very easy against the flu, similar for COVID-19, for the coronavirus family. Obviously, and then symptomatic treatments, for example, with protease inhibitors, that would be very interesting. Let me know how likely you think this is going to happen, and also let me know how likely this is going to happen in a reasonable time frame. It's not going to help us if we find this in 3 years. We need this over the next couple of days, weeks, and months. Now, next thing, and that's a very interesting solution, is, well, it's going to be self-limiting. And the reason it might be self-limiting is temperature. There's some very, very good studies in the past from SARS 2003 that the warmer areas actually automatically stopped the coronavirus. And it's the same family, just a different type. And so there's some hopes that COVID-19 is going to react the same way. And actually the data shows that countries that are a bit warmer actually have a way easier time in treating corona or the COVID-19 in comparison to the colder countries. And that's, for example, why a lot of people say that Hong Kong, Singapore, Thailand has had an easier time kind of containing the virus versus the more colder countries like South Korea or Japan and so on. So obviously that would be very interesting. It could be, right? Let me know if you think that this is a likely scenario. Would be very interesting to hear. And then obviously we have the ones that you can see at the moment, and that is you are quarantining, you are trying to contain it, you're trying to kind of keep people from each other, you're isolating people, you're trying to do contract tracing. So there's a lot of these things, right? So stay home when you're sick, wear masks, and you can see a lot of those things. And sometimes it gets a bit crazy. You see all these crazy pictures with people kind of wearing plastic bottles around their head. And obviously these are the really, really crazy times. But, well, you see a lot of those, right? And so, yeah, this is where it gets crazy. The data and the facts here is, well, a pretty back and forth. Some people say, actually, it doesn't help at all. The only thing that really helps is disinfecting your hands. Masks don't really do anything. And then you obviously have the really crazy kind of things happening where you have all these isolations. For example, you have this now in Italy, where pretty much of northern Italy, Venice, and so on, gets completely isolated. No ins, no outs, the army's coming in. And yeah, this is some really, really kind of crazy scenarios there. And well, and then you have countries that totally go the opposite route. And they're like, you know what? That's not going to work at all. Let's not do any of that. And I just want to show you a couple things. And this is just data and facts and examples. If you think that most countries are better off than Italy right now, and Italy, I think in Europe, has it the worst. But so let's look at the largest economy in Europe, and let's look at Germany. Let's look at the numbers. Italy, and these are the dates when we had a certain amount of cases, and these are dates for Italy. These are the dates for Germany and the amount of cases. And what you can actually see is that Germany right now is simply 1 week behind Italy. So if the data stay the same, and if Germany doesn't manage to do anything, then what's going to happen is, within a week, you're going to have around 6,000 cases in Germany. And this is when it gets really crazy, because you could have similar scenarios as you have right now in Italy, and within the next 10 days, you would have this in Germany. Now, the question is there anything you can do about it, right? And obviously, at the moment, there's a lot of voices and a lot of proponents of saying, yes, we have to fight against this, and we have to stop this. Let me know if you're one of those, that you think, you know, we have to stop this, we have to isolate, we have to really fight this, and so on. And so obviously I'm bringing this up because obviously there are people, Elon Musk is one of those, who says that this is dumb. This actually makes zero sense. And he clarified this. He said it's not the panic that he thinks is dumb. He thinks this entire thing is dumb. He thinks it's totally overblown. It's the media. It's completely pointless. And there was actually a very, very, let's say, polarizing CNBC article with Rick Santinelli, who said the only treatment that we could do is we need to treat it pretty much like any other virus out there. And his point was very powerful. He said, look, the Wuhan coronavirus is not as common and not as deadly as so many other very powerful viruses that we see on a regular basis. And so it was compared to the measles, to HIV, to the seasonal flu, to yellow fever, and so on. You can see this here. So the light blue ones, the light blue kind of squares, rectangles, is prevalent, so how often it pops up. And the dark blue ones is death. And so you can see that the Wuhan coronavirus here, so this is still the old kind of naming here, but basically it's COVID-19 here. COVID-19 is like tiny compared to all the other things here. And if you look at the data and you look at the facts, it's actually dramatically different, right? Obviously, coronavirus has this really high R value, and the R value is how many people are infected by one person. So corona has this really high R value. That's why it's so infectious. Measles, by comparison, has the highest R value, and if I remember correctly from my medical studies, I think it's like around 18. You probably Googling the internet is way easier, but I think it's 18. So measles is by far the highest. But if you compare this to others, obviously they are lower. That's why corona is so infectious. But, and now the key thing is, we do have kind of this high lethality rate, but the major thing here is this. It's nowhere compared in total to all the other cases because we have this age specific age groups where some age groups are, well, way more likely to die from corona than others. So the younger you are, the safer all this is, right? And the older you get, well, the deadlier it becomes. And so there is this really, really large challenge in, well, what should you be doing? The majority of people are actually just gonna have mild symptoms. A small amount is gonna have some severe kind of, infection. And so the question here becomes, where does all this craziness come from? And if you compare it, and this is where it gets very factual, basically COVID-19 is kind of the very first pandemic, if you want to call it, that has massive outreach on Facebook, on WhatsApp, on Instagram, and the media obviously loves it, right? And so it's jumping on this entire thing. And so obviously you have this crazy kind of comparison in all of this where suddenly you have, well, cases and you have a media and you have the public that might not always have the best information on all of this. And here, I want to give you one example, and this is Singapore. Now, Singapore to me is a prime case in how to deal with the coronavirus because they have done a really, really, really good job. You can see the red bars here. They are new infections. Blue are when people were released from hospital. And so initially, the first 2 weeks, Singapore had to deal with all the imported cases from China. And so obviously the red cases came up. And now you had all these blue cases coming up, which means released. And you can see this here. But so here's where it gets interesting. Singapore, even though they had all these crazy measures, at no point managed to completely contain the virus. Actually, in the past couple of days, the infections really, really shot up. And this is kind of concerning because Singapore has done such a great job in actually trying to contain the virus. And this is now where it gets really interesting because obviously Singapore has tried to go this route of number 3 in really trying to contain the virus. And they have actually said if they see that on a global scale, other countries don't manage to contain it, they will actually stop trying to contain it and they will just, well, release it and just say, you know what, go for it. And so obviously it's going to be a very interesting scenario and who knows what's going to be the right thing. I guess, and this is a key thing, many people have opinions based on their emotions and not on rationale because at the moment they are not affected by it. At the moment they only see large companies. They see airlines, for example, being affected, but it doesn't really affect them. The question is going to happen, it's going to come up. What happens when people are like threatened to lose jobs? They are not being paid anymore. Companies kind of downsizing because of the economy. What's going to be the point there? Because at the moment, obviously, the economy is suffering major from people trying to contain it. I mean, a lot of supply chains are breaking down. Companies are not doing business anymore. Events are not happening. South by Southwest just got canceled, and so on and so on. Now, most people don't understand, or most people think that these are great decisions. The question is, would really something happen if these events didn't get canceled, if companies would still meet? And obviously it's a very difficult pro and con because you sometimes don't really know the consequences. And that's why you have those 4 decisions. Are you waiting for a therapy? Are you thinking it's self-contained? Do you think you can contain it as a nation? Well, Singapore hasn't, in my opinion, has done the best job, and they didn't manage so far to contain it. Or are you just going to say, you know what, screw it. Compared to all the other viruses, it doesn't really do anything. Let's just let it go wild. Would be interesting to hear your opinion. What is, in your opinion, the right solution? And at the end, what should you be doing as an investor? So let's kind of look this through. I made a Twitter poll that was shocking to me. So I asked, if there is a global liquidity crisis, because that's what we have been seeing, what's the best place to put your money in? Now, obviously, don't get me wrong. Most of my Twitter followers are hardcore crypto followers, right? And so it doesn't surprise me that Bitcoin has the highest approval rating here. Gold has the second, fiat has the third, and bonds have the fourth. What worries me so much is that this is such an emotional answer, because during a liquidity crisis, there's only actually one, maybe two places where you should put your money. And it's not Bitcoin, it's not gold. Sadly, I love Bitcoin and I love gold, but it's not the place to put your money in a liquidity crisis. It's actually bonds. And the statistics are as clear as it can get. And you can take this from the past 10 days. You can take this from 2008. You can take this from the 2000. The problem with this, and it's always the same thing. The problem is people are such emotional investors. They don't manage to distinguish rationale from emotions because they buy into a narrative without comparing the facts. The facts are as clear. The facts are, over the past days, crypto has been bleeding. Because it's emotional, don't get me wrong. I don't think the value of Bitcoin dropped one bit. Like, I think the value of Bitcoin has been going up, but it's all about emotions. Now, my portfolio as a whole literally hasn't suffered. Maybe it went down by 1 or 2% as a whole. It was super stable, maybe it even went up. And the reason is, it's diversification. It's all about diversification, and that's what people don't get. They're like, I go all in crypto. You can. But the question is, do you survive these times? And this is maybe just the beginning. It's just the beginning because you can look at the numbers here. These are repo markets. If you don't know what repo markets is, we can do a separate video. Let me know in the comments. And this thing went up incredibly. There was such a liquidity squeeze in the repo markets, and that's scary like shit last week. And that's when the Fed had to jump in and they had to decrease the rates by 0.5% because the shit hit the fan. Last Friday, after the week was doing super, super bad, suddenly the S&P 500 in the last couple of minutes of the trading jumped up and made the week be positive. These are things that are crazy all over the board. And these are things where it's very, very tough as an investor to kind of make individual bets. So this is what I would love to end with. A couple of tips that I have. Rule number one, never lose money. So try to hedge your downside. Don't always go for upside. Go for minimizing downside. Key, diversify. Diversification over the past couple of years has been the huge winner. Huge winner, diversification. Data and fact instead of emotions. Don't buy into all the blah blah. Don't buy into all the bullshit that people try to sell you on. It's just not true. Look at the data. And key thing, this time it's not different. History rhymes. Don't buy into the crap the media tells you, that some social media influencer tells you. The stuff repeats. That's key. So at the end, have a good peer group, have good info. Then you should be doing fine. Is it a good time to buy something? Hey, if there's blood in the street, there is. I don't think there's blood in the street yet, but I think that the value of a Bitcoin has been going up and I think the price has been going down. So I think it's the risk reward ratio kind of changed and adjusted. I think that's great. And that's key. And so at the end, what's your opinion on all this? Do you think there's a therapy coming? Do you think coronavirus is self-limiting? Do you think it's going to be stoppable? Or should we just give it to everyone and just, well, let it work itself out like the flu and so on? And what do you think for the investments? What do you think? Is Bitcoin a good investment right now? Gold? What do you think? Would love to hear your input in the comments below. Would definitely be very interesting to hear. With this, always lovely to talk to you guys. Looking forward to a thumbs up. I would be looking forward to getting a subscribe if you don't want to miss any of the future videos we're doing here. And with this, see you next time. Thank you so much. Yours truly, Julian. Bye-bye.